Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my rest of season strength of schedule for the 2021 fantasy football season. Now, in weeks past, we've of course done strength of schedule videos, but going into today's episode, it's going to be a little bit different in comparison to taking and extracting statistics for the entirety of the 2021 season, going back to week 1. I decided, well, many of the teams that we are seeing on a weekly basis from weeks 13 and on are far different from what we saw in week 1. So I've gone ahead and I've extracted statistics from the last 5 weeks of the NFL seasons, weeks 8 through 12, and I'll be talking about the strength of schedule at the running back, wide receiver, tight end, and quarterback positions in order to give you guys some more perspective as to who has the best overall fantasy playoff schedule upcoming and which defenses should we be afraid of that have been playing extremely well as of the last couple weeks in terms of stopping running backs, quarterbacks, tight ends, wide receivers across the National Football League. Before we begin today's video and get into the nitty-gritty details, I want to thank you guys for, of course, supporting the channel every single day. For those of you who are new, be sure to subscribe. We're making a variety of fantasy football content for the rest of the 2021 fantasy football schedule, of course, all the way up till week 18. So if you're trying to help yourself win a championship this year, be sure to subscribe. Check out the multiple videos I post on a weekly basis daily here. Tomorrow we'll have the Hidden Gem Sunday morning, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, like we do every single Sunday morning. We'll be live streaming with updated rankings to help you guys set your lineups. So go ahead and check that out. Also, check out Underdog Fantasy. Again, there's a lot of contests on a weekly basis you can participate in and take advantage of the back end of the fantasy football season. Again, we're already at week 13, which is crazy to me. But hey, for those of you who haven't taken advantage of course, Underdog Fantasy, be sure to do so today by going down to the link down in the description. Again, there's a multitude of contests, whether it is the Thursday night game, the Sunday Battle Royale, Sunday night game, Monday night. There's just contests galore across the board, not even just in fantasy football, but across the NBA, the NHL. You can go ahead and participate in and take advantage of it. There's a lot of fun to be had there, whether it is perhaps even drafting a best ball team for the NFL playoffs, which we'll be doing at the end of today's episode, or even a sophomores and juniors team, players that are in their second and third years. You go ahead, you draft a team, and based on how they perform for the rest of the 2021 season, you'll of course rank amongst players and perhaps win some big money there. Check that out. There's a lot of fun to be had at Underdog Fantasy. If you use promo code Andrew today, Underdog Fantasy is willing to match up to $100 of your first deposit. So again, you drop 100, they're going to give you 100, get you ready to go and win in some money the Underdog way. Check that out. Thank you very much. All right, so we're talking about strength of schedule, and what you can currently see on screen to the left of me is the running back stats allowed by respective defenses. Like I always talk about, how many points defenses are giving up to opposing running backs thus far this season on average in a half PPR scoring format. So from weeks 8 through 12, this is how many points these respective teams have been giving up to opposing running backs on a weekly basis in a half PPR. To give you some perspective, of course, some of these teams have played 4 games because they've obviously had some bye weeks. Some of these teams have played 5. I've even gone ahead and added the statistics from last night's game of the Dallas Cowboys and New Orleans Saints just to make it all clean and well. So even some of these teams have played 6 games as of late. Don't worry, all the calculations have been taken into account. The thing that I wanted to go ahead and mention before we move on to talking about the fantasy playoff schedule and exactly how you want to participate against these teams, perhaps even this week, let's look at some of the teams that just really haven't been giving up many points, because we know that the New York Jets, Seattle Seahawks, Pittsburgh Steelers, Raiders, these have been teams that have been giving up points to opposing running backs almost all season long here. And of course, when we look at the other end of the spectrum, when we see that the Baltimore Ravens, the Miami Dolphins, the Kansas City Chiefs, all 3 of those teams have not given up a single touchdown in the last 5 weeks, that is an incredible statistic, because typically, those have been defenses that you could take advantage of, especially the Miami Dolphins. In the first half of that season, they were giving up 100-yard performances almost on a weekly basis, but they've certainly turned it around as of late. Another stat that I wanted to point out, in terms of giving up the fewest yards per carry, the Los Angeles Rams defense currently holds that stat at 3.19 yards per carry. They're giving up the fewest yards to opposing running backs. I think that's a great statistic to have in mind, and different things that we can kind of play around with. In terms of teams giving up the most receiving yards to opposing running backs, of course, the New England Patriots and the Denver Broncos, they are leading in that current category. Of course, a lot of teams are throwing the ball on the New England Patriots. That shouldn't be a surprise, mainly because that's a defensive philosophy where they don't really like to cover opposing running backs. Either way, now that you've kind of gotten a little bit of the idea as of these statistics as to how many points and stats defenses have given up to opposing running backs, we'll go ahead and take the next step. Of course, on the very left is the same statistic that I just presented to you, but just for a week 13 matter. If you are trying to figure out what the best overall schedule or best overall matchup is for this upcoming week. I think this is far more accurate than what I presented earlier this week during the running back video. Now, to the right of that, we have the weeks 15 through 17 fantasy playoff schedule and the expected fantasy points that respective running backs per team will be scoring. Now, at this current moment in time, we have the Kansas City Chiefs running backs expected to score the most points per week from weeks 15 through 17 of the 2021 season, which gets me pretty excited about the potential of what Clyde Edwards-Helaire can end up doing, followed by the Detroit Lions, of course, DeAndre Swift and or Jamal Williams, whoever is healthy in that backfield, Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon. Again, same thing with that scenario because there's a lot of injuries going around. The Cleveland Browns backfield, followed by Chicago, Jacksonville, Indianapolis, Tampa Bay. Now, a lot of these teams we've talked about in weeks prior in terms of having great strength of schedules at the running back position for the fantasy playoffs, but this gives you an even more detailed description as to who really does have the easiest strength of schedule based on how defenses have been playing in the last month plus. Now that we've gone ahead and demonstrated these statistics, I'll of course transition to the wide receiver position. Just want to first and foremost say, yes, I am going ahead and moving on quickly, mainly because the stats are on screen. If you'd like to take advantage of respective matchups, you go ahead and do so. Just want to give you guys the most information you can possibly have to make the most educated decisions on a weekly basis. That being said, let's go ahead and move on to the wide receiver position. In terms of stats given up to wide receivers by opposing defenses thus far this season, on average between weeks 8 through 12 in a half PPR scoring format. We have the Minnesota Vikings, New York Jets, and the Houston Texans giving up the most points to opposing wide receivers. While on the other end of the spectrum, we have, of course, the Philadelphia Eagles, Buffalo Bills, and the New England Patriots as some of the better secondaries stopping opposing wide receivers. In terms of looking at these stats, of course, touchdowns are a big difference maker, and there's a reason why the Minnesota Vikings are at the very top. They've given up the most touchdowns to opposing wide receivers, while a team like the Buffalo Bills have only given up one touchdown thus far in the last 5 weeks alone. That is an incredible stat, and as long as they continue to do that, wide receivers are certainly going to have a tough time. And when we're talking about like the New England Patriots taking on the Buffalo Bills this week, it's certainly going to be tough for Kendrick Bourne to have another repeat performance, but we're hoping for the best. Either way, just kind of giving you some context as to who has some of the easier matchups going forward at the position and which secondaries have certainly improved, while some others have definitely diminished their overall play. Early on in the season, we saw the Los Angeles Chargers be one of those better secondaries in the National Football League, but every single week they get closer and closer to being in the middle of the pack and not playing as well as we've seen in weeks past. And while we've seen the Indianapolis Colts and the Washington football team give a boatload of points to wide receivers this season already, they really have been playing far better as of late, and their secondaries, now that they're healthy, are back in a position where they're stopping defenders and not allowing as many statistics, giving you guys a little bit more perspective there. Now, we've gone over those statistics. Of course, that has been transitioned to the very left side of the screen in terms of fantasy points per game allowed to opposing wide receivers. And to the right of that, we have the weeks 15 through 17 playoff schedule for the fantasy football season. Now, of course, weeks 15 through 17, the Miami Dolphins, the Los Angeles Rams, and the San Francisco 49ers, they currently have the highest expected fantasy points per week at their current positions going into weeks 15 through 17. While on the other end of the spectrum, of course, the Buffalo Bills, Indianapolis Colts, Atlanta Falcons, they will have their hands full as their schedules will be far more difficult. Now, yes, a 10-point difference is a big deal, but the difference between the Miami Dolphins having the easiest strength of schedule at 32.36 points and a team like, the Baltimore Ravens at 27.4, yes, 5 points may seem like a lot, but it really isn't much. Really, it's just one catch for an extra 50 yards or one extra touchdown here or there that really isn't going to make a big difference. But the disparity between the top and the bottom certainly is the thing that we're keying in on, rather than the multitude of teams that are sitting in the middle of the pack with very similar schedules going forward. Either way, now that we've presented this, we'll go ahead and let's begin talking about the tight end position. Very similar stat base, but we're going ahead and talking about how many stats the tight end position have been allowed by opposing defenses in the last 5 weeks. As you can see on screen, of course, the Philadelphia Eagles, they have given up the most touchdowns, tied with the Las Vegas Raiders, Cincinnati Bengals, and the Cleveland Browns over the last 5 weeks of the season. Overall, typically that's what you want to go ahead and key in on. Which defenses are giving up touchdowns to opposing tight ends? Because typically the tight end position and your tight ends on your roster are mainly going to benefit and become top 12 of the position on a weekly basis if they find the end zone. The influx of 6 points is so valuable at that given position because of the lack of targets and the lack of overall upside. On top of the fact that there aren't a wide volume of tight ends that are, dependable enough on a weekly basis, we have to look at stats like that and take advantage of it. Now, of course, we talk about defenses like Bill Belichick every single week. I talked about it yesterday in relation to Dawson Knox. I typically don't want to play tight ends against Bill Belichick, as he typically has a great overall defensive game plan against the tight end position. And as you can see, he's only given up 18 receptions, 153 yards, and a touchdown, and 6.06 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends over the last 5 weeks. If that's going to be something of a consistent matter, of course, you have to avoid that matchup. Well, you want to go ahead and play tight ends like Logan Thomas against the Las Vegas Raiders this week, or Jared Cook versus the Cincinnati Bengals, or perhaps maybe Jordan Brevin against the Indianapolis Colts, the rookie tight end from the Houston Texans. Either way, giving you some perspective there. We'll transition those stats on the very left side of the screen. Next to that, we have the weeks 15 through 17 fantasy playoff schedule, and talking about the most expected fantasy points for respective tight ends in the final 3 weeks of our fantasy football seasons. Of course, the Washington football team, the Denver Broncos, the New York Giants, they have the easiest schedules. And though some of those tight ends really aren't dependable enough, I know Logan Thomas is definitely going to get there because mainly dealing with injury the whole year. Now that he's returned, he's going to be a huge vital part of that offense that is looking on the up and up, winning 3 games in a row. Of course, the Denver Broncos, Noah Fant, as long as he's in the lineup and ready to go, he is certainly going to be a mainstay in that offense. But of course, their respective tight ends like Albert Okwuegbunam, even the third stringer sometimes steals some points here and there, and we're going to have to live with that being the case. Now, with that mentioned, we'll go ahead and transition to the final position, quarterbacks, going into the rest of the season. Of course, based on the last 5 weeks of the season, in terms of points given up to opposing quarterbacks in a 4-point per passing standard touchdown league, we have the New Orleans Saints, the Minnesota Vikings, the Las Vegas Raiders giving up the most points as of late. In terms of statistics, the thing that really does separate the New Orleans Saints from a lot of other teams on a per weekly basis isn't just the passing yardage and the passing touchdowns allowed, but it's also the rushing touchdowns, 5 that they have given up. The influx of 6 points in comparison to the 4-point per passing touchdown format is certainly a difference maker in the entire fantasy landscape. But as we look at the rest of these statistics across the board, of course, a team like the New England Patriots only giving up 4 passing touchdowns, but having 11 interceptions in the last couple games of their season. I mean, that is how you go ahead and shut down opposing quarterbacks. Outside of Justin Herbert, there hasn't been a double-digit quarterback in the last couple weeks against the New England Patriots. They've been shutting down just about everyone. And on the other hand, the Buffalo Bills, they take them on this week. They've also given up very few touchdowns to opposing quarterbacks, also giving up single-digit points on a weekly basis on average. Either way, do with these statistics as you will. We'll transition with the stats on the left side of the screen. Of course, we see the fantasy points allowed, and as we typically do, we go ahead and we insert those fantasy points allowed into the rest of season schedule from weeks 15 through 17 to determine which quarterbacks have the highest expected points from that span of time. Of course, you see the Miami Dolphins quarterbacks, Los Angeles Rams, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Denver Broncos, and Washington football team. Those quarterbacks, which are specifically Tua, Stafford, Brady, Teddy B, and Taylor Heineke, are expected to have the highest fantasy points scored based on their strength of schedule. Now, their individual play and their individual skills certainly do play a factor, and all of that is going to be taken into account when we make our weekly decisions. But in terms of flat stats on the rest of season strength of schedule part, in going into the playoffs, it looks like you want to have Stafford and Brady because those are the most talented quarterbacks of that group and can certainly take advantage of those easier matchups as they're trying to coast through the rest of the season, make their playoff push, and of course try to secure perhaps a division championship or a first-round bye. Either way, just throwing these statistics on screen, giving you guys some more perspective as we progress through the weeks. Hopefully this gives you a little bit more knowledge and it allows you to make more educated decisions on a weekly basis as you're going through your starts and sits. Now that we've talked about, of course, the fantasy playoffs, I, of course, want to go to UnderdogFantasy.com and check out one of their contests that they're holding up until the NFL playoffs. Again, it's called the Wild Card. And up until Wild Card weekend, which is the Saturday of January, 15th, you can go ahead, travel to UnderdogFantasy.com and draft a team for the NFL playoffs and play fantasy football even after your regular season is done. Again, fantasy football doesn't have to end during our Week 17 championships. We can continue on. And again, if you use promo code Andrew, Underdog Fantasy is willing to match up to $100 of your first deposit. So let's go ahead and participate in a draft for the wild card. I'll give you guys some perspective. We'll travel over right now. As you can see to the left of me, of course, we have the contest, the wild card. And the main purpose of this is to go ahead, hop into the contest via $10 buy-in and potentially win up to $10 grand if you're able to have the best overall team in terms of most points scored throughout the NFL playoffs, which is wildcard weekend, the divisional, the conference, and of course the Super Bowl. But how do you strategize for something like that? Well, of course, it's a matter of determining who is going to make the Super Bowl and having the most participants on a weekly basis going there. And you may be asking me, Andrew, well, a lot of teams haven't clinched the playoffs yet. How are you going to go about drafting this team? Well, I think it's going to be relatively simple if you go ahead and follow these key steps. I mean, mainly, you look at the schedules right now and you look at the teams and their overall records, and you can mainly determine who is going to be in the playoffs. Again, in the NFC, we have teams like the Green Bay Packers, Arizona Cardinals, Dallas Cowboys, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and Los Angeles Rams, all with 7+ wins. While on the NFC, we have the Tennessee Titans, New England Patriots, Baltimore Ravens, Kansas City Chiefs, Buffalo Bills, and Cincinnati Bengals, all with 7+ wins as well. Typically, if you have 7 wins by this point in the season, you have about a 70% chance of making the NFL playoffs. So you can perhaps, go ahead and invest in those respective players in hopes that maybe they can get past their wild card rounds, get past the divisional, and maybe go towards the Super Bowl, because the more weeks you can have, the more fantasy points you can get from those respective players. But the couple stats that I wanted to first and foremost mention is that in the last 3 years of the NFL playoffs, in the wild card round, the wide majority of teams that are winning on wild card weekend are away teams. Again, just this last year, away teams in wild card weekend 4-2. The year prior 3-1. The year prior to that 3-1. So even though you may be in a division title, the better record doesn't always mean that you are the better team on wild card weekend. And at times we see teams like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who were a wild card team last year, despite the fact that they had to play 3 away games to get to their Super Bowl and play at home, they were able to fight through that. But oftentimes you don't see that. You see that the main teams that get to the Super Bowl are often teams that have first round buys. Again, going back to 2018, the Los Angeles Rams and the New England Patriots, both those teams had first round buys. And then the follow-up of the 2019 season, the San Francisco 49ers and Kansas City Chiefs, both of them had first-round buys. And in this last year, of course, Kansas City got there with a first-round bye with a 14-2 record. But in 2020, Tampa Bay shocked the entire world as they were able to make the final push. Were able to beat the Washington football team in the wild card round, followed up by beating their division rival, the Saints, beating the Packers in Green Bay, and then getting to the Super Bowl. So mainly, you want to go after teams that can get to the Super Bowl. And whether that means trying to grab a wild card team that you think will make the push, or grabbing a team that has a first round bye that may have the best overall chances of getting to the big dance. We'll go ahead and talk about that, and let's get into it right now. All right, so the draft starts in about 35 seconds, and I just want to kind of go over my strategy. First and foremost, the thing that I do every time I probably draft one of these wildcard drafts is queue up Derrick Henry. Not because I'm going to take him at the second overall pick, because I think there's a lot of people that don't realize how valuable he is. I mean, his current ADP is 85th overall. And if I'm going to be drafting a giant team that has over 10 players, of course, Derrick Henry should be one of those players, because by the time he comes back, he'll certainly either be playing in week 17, maybe week 18 of the regular season, but probably will be active for the wild card weekend, assuming that the Tennessee Titans can continue on their steady push without Derrick Henry and win some games. All right, as I mentioned, I'm currently on the clock. I'm trying to determine who is the best overall prospect based on who's going to make the NFL Super Bowl. And the first pick was Tyreek Hill, but I'm of the belief that you could very easily go ahead, and it's maybe a crazy strategy, invest in a guy like Leonard Fournette. I think playoff Lenny is a legitimate thing. There's a reason why he took over in the final 4 games of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 2020 schedule. I think there's a very good chance that the defending champs make it back to the Super Bowl, especially if they have a home field advantage throughout the entirety of the playoffs. Them getting there could end up making Leonard Fournette a great overall play. Again, a lot of wide receivers are taken off the board, which is crazy to me, because the way I see it, I'm most likely going to get back, hopefully, one of these wide receivers that are either on the Packers, well, actually, no, Devontae Adams is gone, the Arizona Cardinals or the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Because from my perspective, I'm thinking, okay, one of those two teams could very easily make it to the NFC Championship and go to the Super Bowl. Give myself a very good advantage there. While on the other end of the bracket, of course, we have the AFC teams like the Buffalo Bills, perhaps investing in a Stephon Diggs. But right now, again, I like these running backs coming off the board, but like Ezekiel Elliott, not really interested. He's already slowing down. He's injured. Darrell Henderson, I don't know how far the Rams are going to go, especially considering they're going to be in Wild Card Weekend in an away game. Like I was mentioning in terms of away game stats, does give them a potential advantage. But players like Jonathan Taylor, I don't even know if the Indianapolis Colts are going to make the playoffs, much less win in round one. That is going to be something of a difficult, kind of prospect. But the main idea is being able to predict who exactly is making the playoffs and who exactly is going to get to that Super Bowl, because that is the most points. And for my money's worth, I'm going in with, the idea that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the defending champs, have the best overall upside in that current position. So as we look at the wide receiver / tight end position, who do we still have available? Mike Evans is still here. We still have DeAndre Hopkins. My pick is coming up very soon. So instead of going ahead and making any crazy, I'm gonna hop on the Tampa Bay train and let it keep rolling. I'll take Mike Evans here, and I'm honestly considering even taking Tom Brady at the quarterback position just to stack up. Now, this doesn't have to be a strategy that you roll with, right? Anything can work. Any prediction can come true. And there's a reason why you perhaps maybe you want to draft multiple teams in this wild card draft just to have more overall kind of diversity in your roster. Patrick Mahomes being taken. Of course, this gentleman took Tyreek Hill with his first pick. No surprise that he is on the Kansas City train. Taking, of course, Kyler Murray there. Like I was mentioning, I want to go ahead and grab the quarterback that I think can make it to the Super Bowl. A guy that has done it more than a handful of times. Is the reason why he has 7 rings, Tom Brady. Now, going with 3 Tampa Bay Buccaneers, if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers do not make it to the Super Bowl, my team is done-ski. It's over, right? Because they're not going to play in the wild card round. They're going to have a divisional matchup, and then they'll have a conference finals. If they cannot get past those 2 games and get to the Super Bowl, I'm going to be in a little bit of trouble. But nonetheless, I'm pretty happy with the 3 pieces that I've gone ahead and selected. Everything after this is continuing to select players that are on teams that have the best inside track of getting to the Super Bowl. So where does that kind of point in my direction? I'm thinking I probably want to go get Arizona Cardinals and perhaps grab as many Buffalo Bills and, of course, a Derrick Henry later in this draft. Based on his current ADP, I think I can get him super late, maybe probably in the 6th, 7th round, maybe later, but I want to just grab him just to know that I was able to grab Derrick Henry, because there's a lot of value to be had there. Nonetheless, the wide receiver position should be addressed. I think James Conner is a fantastic running back, somebody that probably needs to be paid attention to a little bit more in these drafts. Of course, Elijah Mitchell being there is awesome. Austin Eckler being there. These are guys I would typically take in any normal draft, but this isn't a normal draft. I don't know if these teams are going to be making it past the first 2 rounds of the respective playoffs unless they're going to make a huge run at everything. I will be taking DeAndre Hopkins here. I think, of course, the Arizona Cardinals, at a 9-2 record, the fact that they've played so well without D-Hop and Kyler Murray in the lineup, both these guys are going to be healthy in the next month or so. They're going to have themselves a little bit of time to get back into game shape and then just take it over in the playoffs. The gentleman before me took James Conner, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Again, he's going after his Kansas City Chiefs, and he's going after the Arizona Cardinals on the other side of the bracket, players that may give him the best opportunity to succeed. Now, of course, A.J. Brown's here. I could go ahead and invest in him. I think it's crazy that Derrick Henry has not come off the board yet. At this moment, when I look around, I think to myself, I probably want to grab another running back, which is why I'm going to go ahead and take you know what? Let's take Derrick Henry. I'm not going to risk it. I just want the player I want. I thought about just grabbing A.J. Dillon there. I was kind of crunched on time because I didn't realize how quickly he had picked. Typically, when I'm not recording these drafts, I'd be hard focused. But at this moment, I'm looking at my team. Oh, let me scoot over a little bit here. Tom Brady, Leonard Fournette, Derrick Henry, Mike Evans, DeAndre Hopkins. Is that a good team? I agree. I do believe that is a good team. Now, in terms of other quarterbacks that I could potentially grab, there's Ryan Tannehill still there. I could certainly wait for him. They're probably going to be making the playoffs. Maybe Mac Jones if I'm looking to try to grab a lesser quarterback later on in the draft at a kind of better overall value later on. Running back, I mean, again, on a weekly basis, because it's best ball, I'm not really setting a lineup. It's just who is the best overall performer going into that given week. You probably want to have more tight ends and or wide receivers because there's so much volatility and inconsistency at those positions in comparison to running back. When I am looking at the available running backs that may be on a playoff run here, we have A.J. Dillon coming off the board right before me, but Damian Harris is quite intriguing in my eyes. I think this is a team that could certainly make the push in comparison to like McCaffrey, Hunt, Chubb. I mean, these are teams that probably don't make the playoffs. I think Damian Harris is a running back that I can certainly go for. Looking at the wide receiver position here, of course, have Antonio Brown, A.J. Brown here, Justin Jefferson, Christian Kirk. I mean, look, if in fact we're going to see a scenario in which Brady's making it to the chip, I mean, I want to have Gronk. So let's go ahead. Let's throw Gronk on here. We have our 4th Tampa Bay Buccaneer. We have 1 Tennessee Titan, and we have 1 Arizona Cardinal. I thought about taking Christian Kirk at that current moment, but I'm thinking to myself, well, I mean, yeah, I could take Christian Kirk, but what are the chances that he's able to make a push there and get as many yards with so many mouths to feed in that respective offense? It is tough. This guy is just grabbing Austin Eckler's left and right. Again, I do respect grabbing those kind of players and hoping that they can make a run, but it is sketchy. I mean, there's a potential that they may not even make it to the big dance, much less. So let me go ahead and check something. It's like Mark Andrews available. Let's see. Mark Andrews. Oh, he is. Okay, no, he was taken. Okay. How about Marquise Hollywood Brown? Because I honestly think that there's a good chance. Okay, he was taken as well. So everybody that is a Raven is already gone. Let's go ahead. We'll opt back to the running back position. We'll take a Damian Harris here. Again, I was thinking, okay, the Baltimore Ravens, they have an 8-3 record. They're probably the best in line to have the number 1 seed in the AFC, have a bye week, go ahead and impose their will at home in the weeks prior, in the weeks after, and get themselves a couple wins there, maybe make a push for the Super Bowl. I mean, probably unlikely based on the way that their injuries have kind of, dictated their season thus far. But either way, just wanted to see if it was possible to grab one of those players. Looking at everything else here, of course, a lot of people are still not going to invest in Ryan Tannehill. I think he is a very sneaky pickup. I think A.J. Brown still being on the board is absolutely insane to me. A.J. Brown was put on the injured reserve with a chest injury. If he's going to be out for 3 weeks, he will most likely be back for the NFL playoffs, unless people are assuming that this team is going to be completely washed out in the next couple weeks, which is, a little bit insane in my opinion. I don't think that that's even a possibility where this team, the way that their defense is played, is just going to go from being 8-4 to missing the playoffs. That would be absolutely unbelievable in my eyes. I mean, regardless of how many injuries that they've faced this season, whether it is offensively or defensively, they've still maintained as a overall great team. So I'm looking to pick up a Ryan Tannehill here, followed by a wide receiver, of course, with A.J. Brown coming off the board, makes it a little bit lesser of a selection. So we'll go ahead and take Tanny here, get my second quarterback just in case, because again, I want a quarterback for the wild card round. If I don't have a quarterback playing then, if Tom Brady ends up being the number 1 seed in the NFC, I want to have somebody else contributing to my overall team. He took Christian Kirk, of course, a fantastic pick. Man, this guy is on, kind of the same wavelength as me. Of course, with Antonio Brown probably coming back from the suspension by the time the playoff starts, I think it's not a bad selection overall to grab him. Michael Gallup, Dawson Knox, Van Jefferson. I mean, overall, there's a lot of players here. I like the idea of going after AB and just, I'm telling you, just locking down my entire Tampa Bay army, because that's really what it is. It is a Tampa Bay Buccaneers army, and that's what I'm going to roll with. Now, in terms of the other players that I'm looking to go after, of course, I don't mind going after, lesser value players, but I want to make sure that they're going to make the playoffs. And there's no really guarantee that, any of these teams at the running back position are going to make it, then there's no point in me investing there, which is why a lot of people obviously went after wide receivers first and foremost, because they thought there's more depth at running backs. But I look at it the opposite way. I think after my 3 picks here, I don't really know if there's much worth in going after some of these other players. That being said, when I look at wide receiver, I think Van Jefferson is someone that I want to go after. I think Odell Beckham is someone I want to go after. Giving them a potential shot at winning a couple games. I think Emmanuel Sanders on the other side of the bracket for the AFC, not bad in any capacity as they make it down the stretch there. What else is intriguing? I think Randall Cobb's okay. Julio Jones is fine if I'm trying to fully buy in on the Tennessee Titans. I don't mind that. But again, he hasn't really seen much utilization this season already. Is this the final picks of the draft? Great. You know what? We'll go ahead. We'll take OBJ here. I think he'll be healthy by then. And I think that's it. I think that's our full draft. I thought I had another pick here. But I think that's it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you everybody for watching. Again, this is the team that I've constructed. So as you can see on screen, we have Tom Brady, Ryan Tannehill, Leonard Fournette, Derrick Henry, Damian Harris, Mike Evans, DeAndre Hopkins, Rob Gronkowski, Antonio Brown, Odell Beckham. I am pretty much stating that I want to get a team that is just going to play the final 3 games. I don't know if there's any wild card teams that can make it to the NFL Super Bowl. Maybe there is this season, and we'll have to wait and see. But for right now, I'm all in on that Tampa Bay train. I did end up drafting a team, I think, a couple nights ago. And this is the team that I was able to put together, going with Kyler and James Conner instead of Leonard Fournette and Tom Brady based on my area in which I was selecting. I ended up getting Stephon Diggs, Godwin, Christian Kirk, Keenan Allen, Julio Jones. Just a little bit of a more diversity at the position. But again, I keep going 2 quarterbacks, 3 running backs, and 5 wide receivers. I think that's a pretty solid balance in terms of overall players. Either way, thank you everybody for watching. Be sure to check this out. Link down in the description. Use promo code Andrew today, and Underdog Fantasy is willing to match up to $100 of your first deposit. Again, take advantage of the incredible contests that they have to offer and try to win yourself some cash. And of course, keep the fantasy momentum going even after the season's done. Thank you everybody, and until tomorrow, Hidden Gems, I'll see you guys. Peace.